Pojedziemy parę słońca, powinno zaszło, a zbrojnego. Wieszko i z tego celu, powinno wyszedł. I tu to jest myślna, bo na to do świata winowi. I dojść do więc nie są zachować, do szatanta kasa mówię. Mana saproko filosofo, czerwasio wino człowieko. Dogadno niż pokoso, pełna pomysł niż proszę, i to ją samo. Kilodan są niż ofa, a to biorą się klasa nim zabawować. She saw the umbrella, we do the in the first time myself. The guy wants to show you about going, top shoe, top suit. Then see my sister, a shabu. Russia, Guiva, Apple, and Israeli, and the game calls me so. Don't say rather be up for them. All of you are voice to say, can't touch my mom. Here are the star carrying the sky. You're right, like a toy for me. I don't want to much for your story. I'm going to go shop there. It's the phenomenon. I'm not so sure. Oh, you're not going to go. I love you, drive. She runs away. I go show. I wrote to brush a show. Not so. Krabasa robiłem szamato, potem go tak siwo znerko. A na centrum dobyję, darmy czasy, niech to mój nasi, drugi na pędzi to. Ja soszę i zjawę słońca, tyk na to. Ain't no episode I call the time we are gone. I'm trying to show you it's the office as well, so I voice in us for some. I'm not saying I should have told you. Show the brilliant, just ready, sans all the guys, like a leg that they do. I should have known, showing you not here, so send me to know me, I don't know. I talk of the man, I know, you know, she's the gash of your family. I draw the night is rain, it's random in the doors of the dawn.
I apologize for the cold or wet morning. I made many things that's not in my control. Before I get to the substance of what I want to say, I'm going to start off with some thank yous, because I'm afraid I won't forget me. First of all, I want to thank, at the very end, Harmony Hospice and LA Jacobowitz, who stepped up to the plate in an unbelievable fashion. Nobody should ever need their services, but what they did was absolutely wonderful. I'm gonna go down the list, not in any particular order. I'm gonna give a thank you to Malcolm Trout for helping us out in that time of need. My good neighbors, Dr. and Mrs. Gary Greenspan. Dr. Greenspan helped us. And there isn't a Shabbos that goes by that his Ishmael does not send food over to me. When we were scrambling to find somebody to take care of the meals last week, and my good neighbor and friend, Bruce Swiper, stepped up and he got me involved with Harmony Hospice. And then the women. Russell Rubin has been coming to my house for 3 or 4 years now. She cooks for us. In the beginning, when Barbara was better, she took her shopping, took her to appointments. I can't say enough for what she did. Stacy Winters was with my wife every day. Sarah Weiser stepped up when we needed her. Very last moments, Sandy Pister. And last but not least, Sarah Carp. Sarah Carp was with her all the time. But when I couldn't be there, I would come home and she would say to me that it was a good day, that it was a hard day. And the days, there were many days that were so hard. And Sarah said to me, Barbara's my friend. Barbara loves me and I love Barbara. How do you sum up a person's life in a few short moments? Barbara and I were together for over 50 years. Last week, my brother-in-law just told me that we were unique because we were high school sweethearts, and we were, and we stayed that way. I saw the way my father acted towards my mother, and in my own minuscule way, I tried to emulate him in his ways. Everyone here knows Barbara as the married Barbara. But I want to share with you some of the things that probably no one here knows, or maybe a few of you. I want to tell you about the young girl that I was smitten with. Barbara never put herself first. She always did for others. This is what people know about Barbara. And it started as a young girl. She had a remarkable ability to envision what something would look like and then create it. I would come upstairs to our bedroom, and there she would sit with a dress sprawled all over the bed. Her bed was her workstation. When it came to hand sewing, she laboriously beaded a dress, and the dress in which she saw the finished product, and nobody else saw that product, but she saw it in her mind. That dress would transform a young Kala into a queen, no matter her social or other type of status. 30 years ago, she helped me design and build the women's mikvah in South Taylor when the city desperately needed one. She was a master at reading blueprints and had a keen eye for detail. Today, we have committees and multitude of people to accomplish this. All I needed was Barbara. She did all this while handling the phones in the infant days of the city Chevra Kadisha. She was on call day and night and didn't falter in her duty for years. Frequently, she was called on to embellish a banquet or a simcha and turn it into a spectacular event using her centerpieces. Everyone in the city knew that she was the best. She had no problem schlepping 40 to 50 centerpieces to a hall. She made multiple trips from the home, where the artificial flowers took up many rooms of the house for years. She was no stranger to hard and tedious work. This attribute she learned from her father and wonderful mother, Mrs. Ray Ducketman. People comment to me as to the beauty of the side garden in our home. This was all Barbara. One time she wanted topsoil, and the store offered to have a truck pull up and drop a load of 1,000 pounds in the side yard. Well, Barbara was smart, and she knew that a large pile of dirt would not sit well with me. So what did she do? She made multiple trips. She carried 50 20-pound bags of topsoil and put them in the yard and spread them out to the yard. So when I came home, all I saw was a beautiful garden. Many of the rooms in our house were painted or textured by her, and standing on an 8 or 10-foot ladder would not get in the way of her artistic vision. I never knew what a gem I had. Before any of you knew her in the community, her sense of duty of what was right was part of her DNA. She loved the arts, but she was also brilliant. We had a high school class of over 1,000 students. Her rank was in the low 60s. Her parents wanted her to use her intelligence and guided her to the sciences. As a dutiful daughter, she did not rebel. All the while, she retreated to her attic to practice and learn her sewing skills that you all know for. Her heart was in the arts. She studied biology, attained a degree in speech and hearing, and eventually achieved a master's in audiology. She never practiced her degree. She did it for her mother and father, because that's what she was supposed to do. Not only was she intellectually gifted, but she was a master of the written word. When she wrote her thesis for her master's, she did not read the question as it was intended to be read, and therefore answered in a fashion that was not the test maker's thrust of the question. And despite writing an entire paper with the wrong answer, she scored the highest grade in the history of the department at Cleveland State University. Her writing ability was so good that the department head overlooked her error, and she won him over to receive this outstanding result. Years later, when I was involved with my partner, Louis Moutsmock, and we wrote a dental book, she proofread every page and rewrote many parts. She did not know dentistry, but she knew how to make the written word resonate with the reader. She knew how to tell a story and educate and inform the reader no matter what the topic was. And not only was the content of her writing superb, but her handwriting was beautiful. She told me when she was in the 6th grade, she worked on perfecting her script and transformed it into a thing of beauty. And once she learned to do it that way, it never wavered. Years later, in the computer age, I took her handwriting and made it into a font that we called Barbara. It was so flawless that one of my children, who shall remain nameless, used to write excuse notes for the school when no one ever was wiser, thinking that they read a handwritten note. That child shall remain nameless. Barbara's father gave her a gift of analysis and problem solving, which went to good use on her alterations for herself and so many people in the community. But it didn't stop there. When our good friend and neighbor, Ellie Albaz, came for a plumbing service call, Barbara always had the problem diagnosed. Ellie told me that she was always right and his job came a little bit easier. As her parents got older, she stepped up to the plate and added their care to her daily jobs. This continued as long as she was able to do this. Often people are balei chesed to strangers and shortchange those at home. There was nothing that she wouldn't do for her family and nothing for me. She would get up early in the morning and walk Hastings so she could be home, so she'd get home in time. So when I came home from shul, she had a magnificent breakfast made for me every single morning. She never faltered in her job as a wife, as an Eishes Chayil, all the while presenting an aura of sophistication in class to those who saw her. When a former neighbor heard that she was battling a horrible disease, she could not believe it. She said that Barbara was the classiest woman she ever knew. Yes, she was. Walking the dog in a blizzard with her fur coat, she was a sight to behold. She gave me 4 beautiful children, each one outstanding in his or her own way. That blossomed into 8 children for me as each one of them got married. And this further exploded into 18 grandchildren, each one unique, each one special. How can I thank you for this, Barbara? You had given me so much, and I don't have you anymore. In fact, her last few years were a chesed for me. She didn't leave me abruptly. Each step down was horribly painful, but at least it was slow. I can't imagine an abrupt end. In Shema, we are told v'ahavta, as a way to relate to Hashem. This term, Ava, is the ultimate connection a person can have and developed. Our culture has cheapened the term to the extent that we don't realize the true meaning and depth of the term. In the musical Fiddler on the Roof, Tevi asks his wife if she loves him. She responds, "Do I love you? For 25 years, I've washed your clothes, cooked your meals, cleaned your house. Giving you children milk the cow, and after 25 years, why talk about love now? But he persists with the question, and she finally says, I suppose I do. And they both end together with, it doesn't change a thing, that even after 25 years, it's nice to know. As she lost her ability to communicate, the only words that she responded to was, I love you, Barbara. And she said, I love you too. She couldn't speak for over a year and a half. There were words here and there, but she always said, I love you. I once saw a show in which a character who died from the same Alzheimer's, and the character said, there were so many horrible and challenging days, but the end, when they were gone, I would give anything to have one more of those days. One more day to say, I love you. The Gemara at the end of Moed Katan has some descriptions of the last moment of one's life. Rav Nachman passed away and later appeared before Rava. Rava asked him if death was painful. Rav Nachman answered that it was like a hair being pulled out of a glass of milk. This is how Barbara left this world yesterday. She was in her own bed and peacefully left this world. Barbara, God loves you too. So I will say it again. Barbara, I love you and I cherish all you did for me. I tried so hard to keep you with us, but I couldn't. We were together for over a half a century. Please forgive me for all that I did, which caused you hurt, whether in actions or words. In retrospect, whatever prompted those hurtful things were all trivial and meaningless. Barbara, I tried to turn around the inevitable. I tried to do so many different things to slow it down. I just couldn't beat it. Forgive me if I could have done more or something different, but you couldn't tell me, so I didn't know what to do. Once again, Barbara, I love you, and I hope you love me too.
Jeffrey called me last evening to tell me that Barbara had passed away. And he said, we've had such a close friendship for all these years. He asked me to come to speak. So that's why I'm here. Our friendship goes back to the days before he was married. And then after he married, and then I became a patient of his together with my wife. All these years, we've had a close relationship. He said so much, there's not much that I can add, and there are others that follow me, so I'll be brief. I wouldn't have said it, but Jeffrey said it, so I'll echo those words. Theirs was a love that began even before their marriage. As he said, high school sweethearts. Barbara did not grow up in this community. When she married Jeffrey, they became fixtures in our community. She always wore a radiant smile. I remember under the chuppah, she was asked to lift her veil for identification purposes, and she lifted it, and she had such a radiant smile. A girl who couldn't be happier to get married to her husband. And Jeffrey said that happiness remained for 50 years. She was an Eza Kenegdo in every way. There are more people who know more about it than I do, but two things I'll mention. Both were touched upon by Jeffrey. One, in the days before we had the organization complete of the Chevra Kadisha, she was this dispatcher for the Chevra Kadisha. She took calls all the time, and he said day and night, and it was done with meticulous care, and no detail was left out. This went on for years. What he touched upon also that I know something about. You know, there are people who can do things and want to do things but whatever they do is not done with perfection. There are people who are not yodim es mekomon. They think they can do more than they can do, and that's left with very imperfect. Barbara was not like that. Whatever she could do, she did with perfection. Jeffrey told you about the gowns that lay on the bed that she beautified. People who couldn't afford a decent one, she took them and made them beautiful. She added sequins, pearls, all that. My own daughter was given Barbara's daughter's gown for her wedding, and she had to remodel all of it, and it was done perfectly. We didn't know at that time how much time and effort it took to do what she did. We found out. Immense time and effort, and she did it perfectly and lovingly. A 19th century American writer, poet, once wrote, "For of all sad words of tongue and pen, the saddest are these, it might have been." There are no sad words for this, because for as long as Barbara was in control of her faculties, Hashem Yisborach allowed her, she lived life to the fullest. There are no regrets. Jeffrey says he asked her, hey, could have done more, could not have done more. For all those years, she was an Eza Kenegdo. And in the last period of time, the roles were reversed, and he was an Ezer Kenegdo, unfailingly. I remember for once in a while we talked about it. It was hard. It was emotionally draining. But he did what he could do, and he could do a lot, to make her as comfortable and loving as possible. There are marriages which are good. There are marriages where we're happy. There are marriages in which there's a loving ecstasy to the last draw of breath, and that was their life. It was a very beautiful life. I'll close with something that you might have thought of too. When we offer condolences to the Ovel, what do Avelut Zion have to do with the Avelus of a Yochid? Hinachem Eskem, just like the Avelut Zion in Yerushalayim. This is Avelus of Yochid. What Avelus Hashem? The Brisker Rov asks it, and he says as follows. I add something. When a person experiences pain, and the pain is deep and sharp, unnerving, and it persists, after a while, the pain eases. The source for the pain remains the same, but with time, it abates. The pain isn't as sharp, it isn't as deep, because time has passed. The tzora remains the tzora, but the pain has been limited. When Hashem Yisborach brings the Geula Shalema, and we're now closest to the Geula than we've ever been, and whether it's Achisheno or not depends upon what we do. When that Geula comes, B'shuv Hashem Esyo Tziono Hayinu Kacholmim. When a person is tortured by a nightmare, and he suffers the reality of the dream as if it were real, and the pressure and the terror is terrible. And after a while, he wakes up, and there's no pain. Why is there no pain? Because time has passed. There's no pain because he realized it was only a dream. There was no reality. All it was a dream. All that sorrows will be like a dream, a nightmare from one which wakes up. So we say to the Ovel, Hamokom Yenachem Eschem, your nechama should be just like the nechama when the Geula Shalema comes. It was all a dream, a terrible dream, but not more than that. If we didn't believe in Tchias HaMeisim and the Nitzchias of Kal Yisrael, the pain would be great and sometimes unbearable. But it's not so. those we loved will be restored to us, and all the sorrows and the tsar will be like a dream from which one wakes up. Jeffrey, you're vibrant. You still have a life to live. Your wife will always be with you in your memory, and where she is, she'll be mogen ladcha. Take courage, be happy. Hashem Yisborach will help you. You have a wonderful family, and Hashem Yisborach will bring her back to you. Mehera b'yameinu.
I stand there and speak as a close family friend. Never be able to appreciate what the Grosses did for us. Mrs. Gross, to me, exemplified called Kvuda Bas Melech Pnima. Her name was never on stationaries. She never was the one that was noticed, was loud. But she did her role in the most theistic of fashion, whether Hachnasas Kala, whether being involved in the mikveh, whether being involved in Chevra Kadisha, whether it was the shul, the dedication to the shul that the Gross family has shown, the rebuilding of the shul, the transformation of the shul. She was there. She was there and played her role in a quiet, unassuming way, but a real Bas Melech, an aristocracy that she carried with her. But at the same time, Pnima, she kept private. It wasn't loud, it wasn't a tumult, but it was always there. Batach Ba'alev Bala. Her husband was able to accomplish so many different projects that Jeff did. So many different things that are different in this city today that most people today don't even realize are a result of Jeff's work. But because he had the Ezer Kenegdai, he had his wife behind him who supported him. The Daf Yomi in the show that's nearing 30 years old was Jeff's dream that he actualized with his wife behind him, encouraging him to be part of it and to make sure that it continues. All other the projects, the mikveh, as Jeff mentioned, the mikveh rebuilding, the moving it from Lee Road, where it was dangerous to go at night, especially on the weekends, and moving it to a place where it could be used with his wife's encouragement, with her decorating it, with her involvement, but always pnima, always in a quiet, in a very tzniistic oifen, but so much accomplished. As was mentioned, all the kalas that she serviced, but in a quiet, again, called Kvuda Bas Melech Pnima, that's what she stood for. As it was mentioned before, she didn't grow up in our community. But as Avraham Avinu lech lecha me'artzecha, as Avraham Avinu journeyed from his community to the Rebbeinu Shloim's will, she journeyed to keep the Rebbeinu Shloim's will. She journeyed and was able to dedicate her life to Torah and mitzvahs, not only for herself and not only for her family, but for the community at large, and left behind a foundation, again, as I mentioned before, that so many people don't realize were her work and her effort that made it possible to continue to build what is now such a beautiful, flourishing community. But the Rebbeinu Shloim rewarded her. Ve'escha legoy gadol. The Rebbeinu Shloim told Avraham Avinu, when you're lech lecha me'artzecha, there will be a ve'escha legoy gadol. She established 4 chashiv mishpachas. There are 4 chashiv mishpachas in our community that were established. That was her reward for her lech lecha me'artzecha. She was able to establish 4 beautiful mishpachas. Once heard from one of my rebbeim, she will live on. She will live on through her children. She will live on through her grandchildren. I once heard from one of my rebbeim why it says bra kara da'avua. Why is a child considered the knee of the parent? Why of all organs is the child considered bra kara da'avua? And the answer is because a person stands up and sits down, elevates themselves by moving their knee. When a person is nifter or nifteris, and they no longer can do mitzvahs themselves, and they reap the reward of all they accomplished in this world, but there is some way else that they can get more reward. And by establishing these 4 chashav mishpachas, she's going to live on, and she's going to be elevated by the bra kara da'avua, by her children continuing in her path, by continuing to dedicate themselves to Torah mitzvahs, by her grandchildren who will follow in that path. And they will elevate and be able to provide for her a constant nourishment of more mitzvahs and more schusim and more schar that she will be able to earn through the ma'asim tovim of her children and grandchildren as they were elevated as a kara, as a knee that elevates the person. The Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos, Tanai loy k'may shenasna lach b'tara. Our mission in this world is to return our neshama to our Maker. L'kai neshama shenasata b'tayrei. We all received the neshama that's tahira. Our mission is to give it back to the Rebbeinu Shloim with the purity that you received it. When a person goes through the suffering that Mrs. Groh suffered, it cleansed her of any wrong she could have done. And she's going back now, and she's giving back to the neshama to the Rebbeinu Shloim. She's giving it back. In the same purity that she received it. May you be a Melitzi Aisha. First of all, I want to ask Mechila in the name of the shul, in the name of my family, in the name of the shul, in the name of the community. We didn't show you the proper respect for all that you accomplished. May you be a Melitzi Aisha for your husband who gave 150% of his effort, who did everything humanly possible to make your life comfortable, to do the best he can to delay the inevitable. For your children who dedicated themselves to you, who tried their hardest to care for you, for your grandchildren, for the show that you invested so much in, for the community.
So, in truth, the Seder Hadvarim should really be that the Achav HaGadol speaks before me, but I think Mami, we always did it a little bit different, and it always ended up being beautiful. So Mami, you spent many years with Mrs. Grunwald learning Chumash Rashi. You started learning Ramban, which you love so much. So let's learn Ramban. Ramban, famous Ramban in Parshas Re'eh, he talks about when somebody loses a family member. So the Ramban explains that there's really nothing to be sad about. They're going to a better place. So why do we cry? So the Ramban says, Torah doesn't forbid crying. That it's understandable when there's a period, that people end up crying, and that makes them cry. And I was thinking, Mommy, that over here it's really verkehrt, because now you can understand what I'm saying, and now you could hear and understand. Now you could remember my name. You haven't said my name in so long. I used to come in and visit you, and used to smile like you knew me, and you did, you loved me, but you couldn't formulate any word to just say my name. I remember the first time I came home and I told my wife she can't say my name anymore. That was the beginning of this long end. And everyone has spoken about all the chesed that my mother did, but we try to think, what could we learn from my mother? What could we take from her life? And I was thinking, the pasuk says by Levaya Hanaviyah that she was Levaya Eishes Lapidos. That's how we describe Levaya Hanaviyah. That's how she's introduced us. What does it mean she was Eishes Lapidos? So Rashi says that she used to make wicks. She used to make wicks for the Beis HaMikdash. That's such a big deal. That's something so amazing. But I saw Rameir Zvi Bergman's Masber that you also find the same idea by Shifra and Pua. How do we describe Shifra and Pua? Because he used to say poo poo, something like that to the babies to calm them down. And he explains that the derech to gadlus, this famous saying that kleine Menschen tun große Sachen and große Menschen tun kleine Sachen. Small people do great things, great acts of that attract a lot of fanfare. But that's not greatness. Greatness is when you do the simple things and you do them well, you do them 100%. There was nothing that Mommy did. She was a loving mother. She adored my father. She was always up every day, making him supper, making him breakfast, doing everything for him. And it wasn't anything fancy. She wasn't going above and beyond what she was supposed to do. She just did it with she was so proud. She was so proud of Tati. She was so proud of her husband, the doctor. And everything, there's nothing half done. There's no such thing as a half done. Everything was beautiful. I remember by one of my sister's chasanas, which again was done a little bit differently than everyone else did it. It was smaller, but it was regal. It was beautiful. And somebody came over to me, not a Baal Batish person, and he just said, it's so beautiful when you see a simcha just done right. It's just done so beautifully. Everything she did, she had to do it, but she did it above and beyond. The Arachaim in Parshas Bereshis bemerks that we don't find that Hashem said Vayar. It doesn't say Ki Toiv when Hashem created Adam. It just says Vayar at the end. It says Vayar Hashem Kol Asher also Ki Toiv Ma'oid. So Zok the Arachaim that the pshat is that the pshat is that a person is created Toiv, but your job in this world is to become toiv ba'oid, is to go above and beyond, to take those talents that you have. Mommy took her beautiful talents of sewing, but just everything else that she did, and she used it for Hashem. And you were a person who was always just toiv ba'oid. You were so beautiful. You were so regal. You were a princess. The Arachaim finishes off and he says, Ashrei enish ya'as hazois. That's exactly what my mother was. Ashrei enish ya'as hazois. You have nothing to be embarrassed of when you go up to Shemai, Mommy. Mommy, I used to come and visit you as much as I could. It was so hard to see you. It was so hard to watch it happen and know that it was happening. And sometimes I felt that if I ignored it, it won't happen. But it was always happening. I would come in and I would leave. I would be reminded of the Gemara in Shabbos. The Gemara in Shabbos, Rav Yosef says, "Kama ilav hayoyma." If it wouldn't be for the day of Matan Torah, Kama Yosef iko b'shuka. How many Yosefs, how many Yossis would there be in the shuk? So what what exactly does he mean to say? So I saw a pshat that Kama Yosef Ika B'Shuka means as follows. Rav Yosef was the well-known Amoyer that suffered from some form of dementia. He did not. He forgot his learning. He wasn't able to remember his learning. Ilad hayoyma. If it wouldn't be for that day when the luchos broke, the day of Matan Torah of Zion Nisan, the luchos broke. But what happened when the shivei luchos broke? What did we do with them? We didn't throw them out. We put them in the aron next to the other luchos. Why? Because even when somebody who is so beautiful breaks and falls apart, it starts disintegrating, but their beauty is still there. You were beautiful till the end. We were all talking how yesterday we were by your bed saying goodbye, saying vidui, and you looked so beautiful with you sitting there and Tati gazing into your eyes with such love. It never stopped. You were the same from when you were high school sweethearts till the last day. You always had that beauty, and the Nashim Tzidkanias of the city that were able always to come over and help. I used to meet people, and they used to just not stop talking about who she was in there, and deep down she was trapped in this body that wasn't doing its job anymore. But you were always beautiful, Mommy. You always will be. As I'm the first child to speak, I can't not talk about my parents' beautiful marriage that they had. Everything my father and my mother did, it was one and the same. I one time heard from my Rebbe, Meir Stern, that he explained, giving me some marriage advice, and he said a story. He had a neighbor, a professor that he was friends with, and they used to schmooze, and that neighbor moved to California, Los Angeles in the early 90s when there was all those earthquakes in LA then. And he came back a few years later to visit Rameir. So he was telling Rameir that, when the earthquake happened, he said, it's so scary when an earthquake happens. He said, it's the scariest thing that I ever felt in my life. So Rameir said to him, what's so scary? I mean, we all have dangerous situations where, you're a scientist, you know that something's happening in the ground, and when the plates pop up, then the earthquake will stop. Why is that the scariest thing that happened? We've all been in risky situations. And the professor chapped him from the Shaila, and after thinking about it, he told Rameir that, Rabbi, there's nothing in this world that you could depend on. If you think about it, your health, your parnasa, your home, there's nothing there that you could be saimachan will be there. He said there's only one thing that no matter what you do, it's always there. So that's the ground beneath your feet. The ground beneath your feet is always there, and when you lose the ground beneath your feet, then there's nothing scarier than that. And a child, the way for someone to raise good children is when they have a good relationship with their wife, they make sure that there's no earthquakes. If a child's in a home that doesn't have Shalom Bayis love permeating throughout the home, that child is growing up through an earthquake. And growing up, there was no such thing as an earthquake. The home was so happy. My parents laughed everything off. As they said, they were high school sweethearts, and that's gave my father ability to really talk his way out of anything, no matter what. And my mother just, no matter when anything happened, he used to say a line, and she'd be cracking up a few minutes later because it was such a happy, fun home. Mommy, you built something amazing. I was thinking about it, but you are grandma and grandpa's continuation in Klal Yisrael. You took their love of Yiddishkeit that they were so proud of. Grandpa was so proud of Yiddishkeit, and you built what you built. You built this family My siblings are all such amazing people, and it's a davar pashut. It came from you and Tati. There's really no way to talk about him without you. Another point in how our parents raised us is an interesting. We know in Parshas Vayeshev when the Maisa by Dina, so the pasuk says that after Yaakov Avinu found out what happened, he waited till the brothers came back. And the question is, why is he waiting? What does he need to wait for his sons to come back? And I think the answer is, there's a chidah in the end of Parshas Vayetze. Yaakov refers to his sons, Vayomer Yaakov la'echav liktu avonim, after the Maisa with Lavan, Vayomer Yaakov la'echav liktu avonim. So what's the lashon echav? So Rashi says, his pshat, that they were brother. Why are they calling them brothers? They're his sons. So, but Rashi says that they were brothers when it came to war. They were ready to fight with him. And the Chidah says something I think amazing. The Chidah says, Lamanu sheYaakov Avinu hayamachshiv banav ka'echav. He treated his children like his brothers, like one of him. Obviously, there was a moira and there was a certain covet in Yira, but when the parents related to their children, it was a certain type of ne'imus. I really don't know how to describe it. You just have to watch the way my mother and my father used to talk with us. That's really the only way. The Chidah finishes off. And that's how you'll have a beautiful family. And that is something that my parents, and they used to almost like take eitzes by us and talk to us. And that's another nakuda of the beautiful home that we grew up with. Thank you so much, Mommy. And I just like to end that we talk about, we always refer to people, Harav, Hagoyin, Hagadol. So what is a Gadol? What do we mean when you refer to someone as a Gadol? What makes someone great? So Rashi tells us, Rashi in Parshas V'schanan, Rashi says, and the pasuk atah chileis v'hareis is godlucha v'yotcha chazaka zok Rashi as godlucha zu midas tuvcha. Heard many times from my Rebbe Meir Stern that how do you touch up a person's godless? How do you know someone's a great person? Is zu midas tuvcha. I really have no other way to describe my parents. Tati, you are a gadol. Anytime anybody would ask me how you're doing, I would start off first, let's get the situation straight. My father's a gadol. There's nothing to talk about. You and Mommy completely had a life. Like Reb Chaim Volozhiner says, the point of a person in this life is the hoyol la'achrini, to help other people. And I was thinking today, since I guess I kicked the ball off when I was 8, all the different situations that you've gone through. You've gone through me, you went through your brother, you went through your parents, you went through Shani, you went through Mommy, and every single time you don't change. And I was thinking to myself, he needs a Sarah Nisyanis. Well, when could we be Zeicha just to be shketim v'shanonim, to live out peacefully and not have to have so much on your head, so you could just not have to have so many tzaras on your head? Grandma, you loved Mommy so much. I still remember when Mommy bought, I don't know how long it was, but she bought you and Grandpa maybe a car, a Mother's Day car, a Father's Day car, whatever it was. Is that picture of that little girl? Remember that picture of that little girl on her daddy's things? And you said my grandpa said that Mommy's always going to be his little girl forever, and she always was. The kibbut ava aim was aim l'shar. My mother would not have my parents come over if she wasn't dressed, if she didn't have makeup on. There was no such thing. It was mamish like a melech was coming into the house. Everything was set beautifully, and Grandma, you've lived an amazing long life and should continue. I feel like today is the day when you got old, when we lost Mommy, your beautiful daughter. But Mommy, your Grandma, we're all here for you. You have a wonderful family built by your daughter, We're all here at a drop of a dime to run over to do whatever we can for you. Don't forget that ever.
When I sat down this morning to try to prepare, like a gross, we're up very early, couldn't learn, no davening. And I struggled between two hats that I wear. One hand, I'm a rabbi, a speaker. On the other half, I'm a son. How do I prepare? Then the first thing that came to mind, Mommy, is you always referred to me as my son, the rabbi. So you're Pasha, my Shaila. And then what came to me is something that Danny mentioned, that famous song, The Deaf Man in the Stiebel, where his father finally heard him daven. How long is it since Mommy heard a speech of mine? And even longer than that, since she understood one. The early years of her illness, she came to Shul, came to the Shabbos Shuvah, Shabbos Agaldas Drashas. My father would bring her. Mrs. Manis, Mrs. Dessler would bring her, take her home. She was able to be there. She didn't really understand what was going on. Sort of knew who I was. The past few years, obviously, that wasn't possible. So today is really the first speech in a very long time that she's hearing, understanding. We cry. We spell the word crying, Boiche, Beis Chav Hey. I want to share with you some words from Rabbi Yosef Nehemiah Kornitzer, Zechreinu Levracha. Those who listen to my speeches know my obsession with Rabbi Yosef Nehemiah, the Rav of Krakow. And he says that each letter in this word, Boiche, is referring to something else that we cry over. The Beis is bias. He says we cry when someone passes away for their household, for their mishpacha, because a man and a wife, a husband and a wife, are the foundations of a home, foundations of a family. And one of them is missing, one of them is taken. The whole foundation is now shaky. Ish v'isha shchina shruya beinayim, says Rabbi Yosef Nehemiah, Churban Bayis Yisrael, when someone's taken and the home is now shattered, the foundation has been shaken. It's kechurban Beis Hamikdash, a house that had the Shechina in it is a Beis Hamikdash. And then there's the Churban of that Beis Hamikdash. And one might say, but my mother really wasn't active in the home for a few years already, unfortunately. But the Rambam tells us that when Shlomo HaMelech built the Beis Hamikdash, he knew that eventually the Beis Hamikdash was going to be destroyed. And he built deep down under the Makam HaMikdash, says the Rambam, a deep, deep place in order to hide the Aron HaKodesh. And Yeshayahu HaMelech knew about this, and before the Churban, he hid the Aron in that place that Shlomo HaMelech had prepared. And Rabbi Akiva is bothered. The Rambam is not a storybook. The Rambam is not a history book. The Rambam is a psak halacha. Well, why does the Rambam have to tell us what Shlomo HaMelech built a place to hide the Aron? And Rabbi Akiva says, because the Rambam later on paskins that the Kedushas Habayis, Kedushas Beis Hamikdash, Loi Batla, has never left. Says Rabbi Akiva, the Rambam holds the reason it never left is because the Aron is there. And even if you can't see the Aron, and even if the Aron is deep down somewhere hidden in the recesses of the earth, but Kolzman, the Aron's there, there's Kedusha. So, even though she wasn't active, she was there. She was there deep down somewhere. Kolzman, she was there. The Beis HaMikdash was Kayim, the house was Kayim. But unfortunately now, she's missing. And that we cry for the bias. And it was spoken about so many times already today. And Donnie, about everything that my parents did, the home that they built. And Tati, you did everything you made possibly, and more. Once again, another challenge. You taught us about responsibility. You taught us loyalty. You taught us how to be a good spouse and how to be a good father, always trying to shield the children. How am I doing? You ask how you're doing? I'm okay. I'm okay. But Tati, we're here for you. We're here for you. And part of that bias, as was mentioned also, was my mother's kibbut avim, because that's where the foundations came from. She was totally dedicated to her parents. And the truth is, when her father, like Donnie said, she was always her father's little girl. When Grandpa was nifter, 8.5 years ago, that's when she really started going downhill. She couldn't handle it. She couldn't handle that her father wasn't here anymore. And Grandma Ray, she's a testament to you as well. And we're here for you as well. And you're a strong person. And you've gone through so much. And we'll help you get through this as well. The chaf of Boicha, says Rabbi Yosef Nechemia, a person is not here for himself, he's here to help others. The chaf stands for Kappa Prusa Lo-Ani, the hand that's stretched out for the Ani. That's the chesed that a person does in their life. My mother, as was mentioned, was involved in many chasadim. Before there was an organization like we have today called Bikur Chaylim, there was Bikur Chaylim. And every week she went hospital visits to the different hospitals, and her together with other people. As was mentioned, the Gemach centerpieces as well, that she made. These centerpieces, paid for them herself, schlepped them, kept the Gemach in the house. These were things that the city of Cleveland didn't know of, many places didn't know of. Now is very common, so many. My sisters tell me, I don't recall this, but I was out of the house at the age of 13. They say that whenever someone had a baby in town, my mother sent over her famous tuna melts. It was a well-known thing. If someone had a baby, they got a special tuna melt from my mother. In Bikur Chaylim, for all the years, she would make food. Every Friday, she sent chicken to Bikur Chaylim, a chicken to Bikur Chaylim. My father kept that up the past few years, as well as the schus for my mother. Her sewing, as everyone knows, besides that she was an unbelievable expert and she was a perfectionist to a fault. It wasn't only kala gowns. I think in Torah Tzvila, when we used to daven there in the old years, I think she was originally sewed the mechitza, their first mechitza for Torah Tzvila, she sewed. Anything that was not needed in shuls in different places, she took care of. And like Rabbi Margaretin said, but nobody knew. Nobody knew. It just was. It was done. And the Chaver Kadisha, as we mentioned, the phone was in our house, in our family room. There were 2 red phones that had the dial. There's one still in the house, but not those. And one was the house phone, 321-6381, and the other one was the Chevra Kadisha phone. And in the beginning, she was the one who arranged all the taharas. Eventually, she didn't do that anymore, but she was the first call anybody had, Berkowitz had, when there was a tahara and it needed to be done. My mother was the first call all times of day and night. The sewing of the kala gowns is mentioned many times already. In Pirkei Der Belezer, Parak Yud Zayin, when it talks about Gemilas Chasadim, Pirkei Der Belezer says, Gemilas Chasadim la'avelim enayin. How do we know the concept of doing chesed with avelim? And you'll see in a moment, it's not only for avelim. The Pirkei Der Belezer wants to know, how do you know the concept of Gemilas Chasadim for kalas as well? And the Pirkei Der Belezer says, we learn from Izevel. Izevel, the wife of Achel, was a big Rishanta. And yet, the Medrash says that her house was overlooking the street. And any time there was a kala who passed by on her way to her chasana, so Izevel would go out of her house and she would clap and dance for her. And any time there was a mace that went by for a Levaya, she would go out as well. And she would also, the old ladies used to clap as well for mason. And she would walk after the mace. And the Medrash says that even though the Navi said a terrible klala about what's going to happen to her after she's going to die, Izevel, but all of those limbs that she used for the mitzvah of Gemilas Chasadim and for Avelim and for Mesim, those were saved. Those were saved from the terrible klala that the Navi had given her. And my mother, Chevra Kadisha, and taking care of kalas, those two things, those are your schusim, mommy. Every limb of your body took care of those. Chevra Kadisha was in your head. You had it all arise of who's on call tonight and who's out and who's a substitute. This was, anytime there's a tahara, there was a whole tumult in the house of phone calls and things like that. There was no WhatsApp and texting and groups. He called every person, and he didn't even push the buttons. He got to turn the dial for every number. It was ganz avaida. She used her fingers, she used her mind, she used her body. The same thing with sewing for the kalas. It had to be perfect. As Rabbi Einstein has said, people don't know how long it took, and we'll get to that soon. But it was more than that. If something was a drop-off, my mother redid it. She redid it. So if something took 20 hours to do, she had to redo it for another 20 hours. But if it's not perfect, she's not letting her go. She's not letting it happen. They used to joke about my mother's sewing. Most people, when they sew, so all the stitches are on the inside. If someone's wearing their clothing inside out, it doesn't look nice. My mother's stitches were so perfect, you're able to wear her gowns and her clothing inside out, no one would know the difference. That was her perfection, because she wanted every kala, and she wanted every person who came to her that's the best they could be, the most beautiful they could be on the day of their chuppah. And these are your schusim, mami. That's the chaf, kappa parsalani. And the hay is for tshuva. And I'm going to say it differently than Rabbi Yosef Nechemia said it. The hay, Chazal tell us, the world is similar to the letter hay. Unfortunately, a person could fall out the bottom of the letter hay, but you could always climb back in the top to do tshuva. And as mentioned, that my mother didn't grow up in our community. The truth is, she grew up in this neighborhood. She grew up right here in Altamont, 3392. She always said, I went up 100 numbers, 3392. Now I live at 3492 Severn. And right at the end of the block is Sinai Synagogue. And as a young girl with very little affiliation, for some reason she used to go and daven Rosh Hashanah at Sinai Synagogue, Rabbi Picholtz. My father said it was before he met her, so she had to be all of 14 years old. We have in the house last night, I saw a machzer, an old Birnbaum machzer that had the Altamont address and phone number in it. I didn't even know this. So as a young girl, she was already drawn. And then later on, and after she met my father, in those days, Bali Tshuva weren't like the in-style thing. There wasn't a lot of support. My parents integrated straight in, living on Tremaine, with all the yeshiva light, being a part of the yeshiva family, eventually coming to the Heights as one of the very first people to move here to the Heights from the yeshiva. And she was always growing. She was always growing. She would come to Mrs. Barkin's shir and went on for years, taping it and notes. In the beginning, it was like a very Hamish shir. She used to bring her sewing to the shir, and she would sew by hand during the shir. People would bring different things to do. It was like for young mothers. As Donnie mentioned, or someone mentioned, she learned Chumash with Mrs. Grunwald for years, Chumash Rashi. They finally made a siyum on Chamisha Chumshei Torah, and like Donnie said, they started then with Ramban. She was constantly saying Tehillim. Looked at her Tehillim last night. There's all these sticky notes of which kapitluch to say for family members, for their ages, for chaylim, part of those days that maybe they still have it, the groups of women who say a certain amount every day for chaylim in the city. Must have been, I don't know, probably 40 different kapitluch that were marked off, all different types of colors of what she was saying Tehillim. I don't know when the last time the Tehillim was used, but this is who she was. That's the hay and that's the boicha. That's what we're crying for each and one of these things. For the bayis, for the kaf, kappa parsalani, and for the hay of tshuva, of always coming closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom. If what you went through, Mommy, wasn't enough to go with a clean slate, but I have for you now the schus that I've told you numerous times you're going to take with you. I'm going to share with all of you a story that maybe only I don't know if anybody knows, maybe a few people. I'm sure my father does. Because Chazal tell us, Kol hamaver al midaisav marviri mimenu kol peshav. Any person who overcomes their midais, all their peshaim are taken away, and obviously it's someone who has an isayin in a certain area. I want to share with you a story that happened probably about 20 years ago. My mother then was sewing for Kalas, and she spent 80 hours. Stop for a moment and think how many hours 80 hours is. Hand sewing beads, as Rabbi Yanser says, we don't know how long it takes. 80 hours sewing beads onto a Kalas gown of a friend. But it didn't make a difference who it was. And the Kala got married out of town. And those were the beginning days of the internet. And there was this website called Only Simchas, where people could post pictures of Simchas. And one of the family members noticed this Kala, the picture of her at her chasana. The only problem was she wasn't wearing my mother's gown. She was wearing someone else's gown, a different gown. For whatever reason, we don't know. It wasn't for her, and she chose not to. And I'm sure the people made a cheshbon. My mother spent so much time on the gown. Why should they tell her? She'll feel bad. How will she ever know anyways? It's out of town, the chasana. It's not like you got live pictures from chasanas like you do today. But she found out, and people wanted her to confront them and say, listen, at least say I'm sorry, give me a reason, something. And she called me up and she said, and those who know my mother didn't mince words. If she wanted to say something, she felt them, she said it. And that's why this was a very big nisayon for her. And she told me, she says, please give me an eitzah. What should I do? What am I going to gain, she says, by confronting these people? I'm sure they feel bad. For whatever reason, they have a reason. So I did a chesed. My chesed was to sew 80 hours by hand. So if they use it, they use it. They don't use it, they don't use it. I'm going to go make a fight with them? I'm going to go make them feel bad? What am I going to gain from it? And I was blown away. I was blown away by the shaila. I was blown away because it really wasn't so much her nature. And yet, she decided to keep quiet. And I'm sure the family doesn't even know how to yay mazah. That's called a maver amidoisa, mavir mimenu kol peshav. I told her, it'll be the biggest chus for you, I told her. So for some reason, the Rebbeinu Hashem says that this wasn't enough. This is it. This is your ticket, ma. Just tell him. It was a design for you. And those 80 hours compounded with the Now you know how long it takes to beat a chasana gown. Compound that by how many chasana gowns she did and how many she redid. Hours and hours and hours of being mesameach hakala. Being mesameach hakala. There's no greater schus. There's no greater schus. And this is what you're coming with, Ma. Of course, I'd just like to thank all those my father already thanked, all those who were involved in the care of my mother, Stacy and Sandy, and of course, Sarah. And really, we tried our best. Like I said, my father shielded us a lot. And it was hard to come and visit, but we did anyways. Probably could have done more. And really, as for myself and my siblings as well, we have to thank Shani and Yitzi as well. Because really, they had Mommy and Tati every Friday night, Shabbos morning, when things were good, when things were worse. There's still Tati as well. When Mommy couldn't come, they really went out of their way, more than anyone, I think, in that regard, to take care of them. And it's our hakaras hatov to them as well. Mommy, for sure didn't treat you properly. Because you were just our mother. They've been was regal, aristocratic, seamstress, taking care of collars, but to us you were just mommy. You were just mommy. Mr. Mechila, on behalf of myself and my family, for not giving you the proper covet, and probably not doing as much as we could have in the last years. But we came and we tried. I bring my daughter every week last year after school, my Dasi. And it's just 2 weeks ago, Friday, I came with my daughter Chaya, who had accomplished something, and I told my mother, you know what Chaya did? And she said congratulations to her, and she was so happy for her. But we could have done more. I'm sure you'll be my chalas. Mommy, we're going to miss you. But you're going with a lot of chosim. Going with a lot of chosim, coming from such a quiet and unassuming place. Look, the city of Cleveland has come out for you to give you the proper kavod achron. L'chi b'shalom, sanuchi b'shalom, samdi l'gayrolach l'ketz hayamin, bilam avos l'netzach, u'mocha adinei Elohim dima mi'al kapanim v'neimar amen.
El Molei Rachamim, Sheichem B'Ameroimim, Hametzei Menucha Nechoina, Al Kanfei Hashchina, B'Mahalois Kedaishim Tahirim, Kezayah Rakia, Mazhirim es nishmas in the bas Reb Shmuel HaKohen, Shochal Yoylama, Bavor Shemishpachta Yitei Tzedakah, V'yaraskaras Nishmasa, Began Eden, Tehei Menuchasa, Lochein Baal Rachamim, Yastireha B'Seiser Kanafav Li'aylamim, V'yitzror B'yitzror Chaimes Nishmasa, Adonai Ho Nachalasa, V'sanuach V'shalom Amishkava, V'naymar Amen.
We're going to ask those who are going to the cemetery before you conclude the service, when you get to your cars, if you're parked facing the opposite way of Taylor, pull your car around and face towards Taylor. We'll direct you. We'll put flags on your cars.
Okay.